It's to 8 now. And back to our main news. The Scottish Government is set to declare a national housing emergency. The move preempts Labour plans to bring forward a motion on the issue in Parliament. Earlier this week, they condemned the government, accusing ministers of ignoring the crisis and fanning the flames by imposing brutal cuts to the housing budget. Well, Shirley-Anne Somerville is the Social Justice Secretary. She's with us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary.
You voted down a previous motion by Scottish Labour in November calling for this. Why the change of heart?
I think the Scottish Government has recognised for some time now that there are major challenges with housing in Scotland, and there is a serious problem that we all need to get behind. And I think the reason why I've taken the decision that I have today is I want to get away from defining the problem and on to what we can all do to sort this, to find the solutions. And yes, that's about what the Scottish Government can do. It's also about the different levels of government, the UK Government, the Scottish Government, local authorities, working together to define, to not just define and discuss what the problem is, but to see what we can do to solve it.
Isn't the reality that actually you've made this announcement because you felt you were going to lose the vote in Parliament today? You weren't sure whether the Greens would back this, so you're getting in ahead of that?
Well, I think it's very important to reflect on the challenge that the First Minister has given us since John Swinney came into office. He wanted to be frank to the people of Scotland, and he wanted to be frank to members right across the chamber about what it's like to work in minority government. So that's exactly what we're doing. I want to make sure that we're using the debate today to recognise the context which the Scottish Government is working in. For example, that 9% cut by the UK Government in our capital budget, which inevitably it has an impact on our plans going forward. But I also want to work with parties right across the chamber to see what we can do within the devolved settlement with the powers the Scottish Government has, but also to make sure that we're working with the UK Government and with local authorities. So this is about ensuring that we are looking at solutions, taking a responsible approach as a minority government, and ensuring that we are rising to the challenge that the First Minister has given us.
So you're taking the opportunity today to blame Westminster for this. As you say, there was a 9% cut in the budget. That's not new information. We knew that that was a cut to your capital budget at the end of last year. Your government took the decision in its budget to cut the affordable housing budget by £200 million. That's 26%. The two don't tally up, do they?
Well, forgive me, Gary, I think it's very important that we do look at the context. And the financial reality that we are in at the moment is that we have seen that cut to our capital budget at the same time as we've seen rocketing construction inflation because of Tory mismanagement of the UK economy and, of course, building on austerity. That's not blaming anyone. That's the context of which we are in. Now, do
you accept your share of that then, given that you cut the affordable housing budget by 26%?
And that was one of the most difficult decisions that we had to take. Now, since that budget was passed, we have seen another £80 million being made available to ensure, for example, we do even more than we have done already.
Well, it's not another £80 million. You put £80 million back in. It's £40 million a year. That's £80 million over 2 years. At this rate, it would take 5 years to get back to where we were last year.
Well, Gary, what I want to do is have a very frank conversation right across the chamber, because minority government means government needs to be done differently. But there's a challenge for the opposition parties in here as well. If we're going to spend every opposition day, as we're doing today, asking the government to spend more money in education, asking the government to spend more money in housing, that is absolutely the prerogative of all the opposition parties. What I think would actually be of more benefit to the people of Scotland is to actually look at the reality of the situation. And if the opposition parties want us to cut from another budget to put more into housing, I'm more than happy to have that discussion with us. But we can't keep getting calls for more without asking, also rising to the challenge about where that money's coming.
But it's not just the opposition parties, is it? I mean, we heard from Shelter Scotland earlier. This is not just the opposition parties you've got to look in the eye. 10,000 children at the moment are stuck in temporary accommodation. So what difference will declaring a housing emergency today make to those 10,000 children?
Well, that's exactly why, Gary. It's important that we declare the housing emergency and then we get round the table, as the Housing Minister has done for many, many months now, with shelter, with crisis, with local authorities to see what can be done. So we're still spending, despite the cuts to the capital budget, we're still spending nearly £60 million on affordable homes next year. We've got that £80 million included in that for acquisitions. We've got a housing bill about to be going through Parliament that strengthens homelessness duties and also deals with some of the challenges in our private rented sector, because we do need to look at rent controls in that area. And the Housing Minister has just in April convened the Housing Investment Task Force to look to see where we can provide more innovative routes to finance for the private sector, for example, to be able to help the government in this situation. So action is being taken by the government. If there are other proposals coming from other political parties with the greatest respect, which isn't just spend more without telling me where that's coming from, then we are absolutely committed to working across the Parliament with that. But it's also important, Gary, very important that we work with the UK government, because it's not just a 9% decrease to the capital budget. It's the fact that we have an asylum process, which is why Glasgow City Council had to declare an housing emergency, because they are seeing a tremendous burden placed on them because of a UK government policy on asylum. And we also need to look at what other councils can do to ensure that everything that can be done within their powers is being done, working together, just as I think Shelter and others have challenged us to do, to make sure that we're taking this issue head on.
Well, we heard earlier from the Accounts Commission that councils are facing a real difficulty in balancing their budgets. They're going to have to make all kinds of cuts to try to mitigate the effects of what they say are years of cuts in the grants that they get from the Scottish Government.
Well, of course, we've provided a fair settlement to councils under those very difficult circumstances that I've already spoken about the financial
But you accept
context.
they will have to make cuts?
I accept they have to make difficult choices. We all do. But with respect, Gary, this isn't just about money. This is about, for example, making sure policies such as allocations are fit for purpose. We've got councils who haven't looked at them for many, many a year, and they do need to be looked at. We've got councils doing exceptionally good practice that's dealing with some of the challenges in their areas around temporary accommodation, around flipping tenancies. Now, that's one example. It's a technical example, but it's making a real difference. So what can other councils learn from that? That doesn't require money. That requires us to share good practice and learn. It won't be the same for every council, but it can work. And what are councils doing on voids? We see a very increasing number of voids within certain councils. What's in the council's area to do that? And what can we do as a government to help them as well? So working together, finding out what the problem is, but then getting around the table and tackling that.
And just